Hello there, good to see you and hope that you are keeping well. Now this might be my last video from the office for a little while, as here in Hong Kong we've had a spike in coronavirus cases. They're calling it the third wave, and so a lot of places are closing down. We're shutting down our office, not shutting it down, but we're having people work from home for a while. They're doing some slightly odd things, like restaurants are not allowed to serve food in the restaurant from 6 p.m. to the end of the day, yet lunch times is fine, which I don't quite understand. Anyway, things are happening, and it means that my next video may be me surrounded by records once again, which you may or may not enjoy. It's completely up to you, with all the banging and the lift noises that I get in my office that I don't get here in the office, in my house that I don't get here in the office. Now, I want to talk about a couple of things this week. The main thing that I bring this forward, originally I was hoping to get someone to speak about this with me, but they're not going to be available because we can't all be in the same place again, which will make things a bit more difficult. But the thought about working from home again. Now, here in Hong Kong, we haven't done it nearly as much as pretty much the rest of the world have. If I look at some of my colleagues all over the world, they've all been at home for a very, very long time. You spend a lot of time on Microsoft Teams calls, not Zoom calls, Microsoft Teams calls, so figuring out what background the people have chosen behind them. I mean, this one is pretty, to be honest, it's pretty boring. It's just the office wall. The records one was pretty more interesting. But the thing is, you see this whole bookcase battle going on. People trying to have the most intelligent books on their bookcases, often with them clearly the spines have been bent. So they've clearly been reading them, or at least they've bent the spines to make it look as if they've read them. So I was thinking of getting a copy of Infinite Jest and just putting it behind me, perhaps with notes hanging out of it about how intelligent it was and how much I enjoyed reading the whole thing, even though it was incredibly long. If you don't know what Infinite Jest is, look it up. It's a very long book, but it's quite good. But yeah, it's more of a stream of consciousness in some ways, but there we go. A bit like these videos. Anyway, the thought of being back in lockdown made me think a little bit about Zoom fatigue. Now, Zoom fatigue, if you've heard the phrase, then you will know it is not just being tired because all of your data has been sent to a server in China and may have breached GDPR, and who knows what's going on with Zoom at the moment. I certainly don't. No, it's not that. It's the act of where you're spending so many times on video calls all the time that you start to get a bit, well, sick of them. You start to go a bit nuts. Now, I've experienced not Zoom fatigue, but Zoom displeasure in the last, I suppose, in the last few weeks. Because I don't know if you've noticed this, but certainly now that most of us are working from home at various points, people have stopped making phone calls. I mean, phone calls were pretty rare anyway. It would be very unusual that someone would phone me directly. They would instant message me, or they would maybe email me, but never phone. But if you had an online meeting, a meeting where everyone wasn't in the same place, it was almost always a phone conference, and they were fine. But now they've all changed to Teams conferences and Zoom calls where everyone can see each other, which may be good because everyone says, oh, well, it feels more like you're in the same room. But it doesn't. It just feels like you've got a lot of faces on a screen all sort of staring at you, often with better things to do, and they're just having to put up with it. And also, you find that what could have been a call what you could have done early in the morning, this is my example, when you have to do an 8 a.m. telephone conference, and suddenly you click on the calendar link and find out it's a Teams call, which means you've got to do it with your face there, and you frantically have to go and do your hair. It can be a bit of a problem. Now, I'm joking about sort of the sort of weirdness of it all, but there is a bigger story to it, which is why really I was hoping to get someone here who's more of an expert on this topic than I am. I was going to talk about the law bit, which I still will. But that is the impact of technology and how it's being used during lockdown, in that we're all now essentially walking offices. Our job follows us around, and I mean, that's always happened. We've all got mobile phones. We all are always available. But now the requirement to almost feel as if you should be switched on all the time is a real problem. And I wonder the impact that's having on people's mental health. Now, I did a completely unofficial, completely unscientific poll of colleagues who've been working from home and said, you know, what time do you start and what time do you finish? Like, what are your office hours, essentially? And the majority of them, almost all of them, with a few notable exceptions, made the point that, well, actually, whenever the first email or the first message or the first call comes in, they're then technically online all the way through until they go to bed. So people will have their laptops next to them while they have lunch. They might be watching TV, they'll have their laptops with them in the evening. They may even, and this is the worst example, having a family dinner, people have got their phones and laptops ready just in case. So you're now checking things all of the time, which means you're always on and you never get to switch off. Now, I'm a lawyer. Probably, if you didn't know that already, then you do now. Hopefully you did by the name of the channel, but there we go. Maybe they didn't think I was a lawyer. Maybe they thought I was making things up. Who knows? But I'm a lawyer, and we don't have the greatest reputation in our profession for mental health care. Law firms have improved immeasurably over the last few years, but certainly when I was a trainee, which was a long time ago, we're talking about 20 years ago, that shows how old I am. But when I was a trainee, mental health was way down on the agenda of what was important. It was billings, probably still the case, let's be honest. It was presenteeism, always be in the office. I remember actually having a supervisor who on a Friday evening would walk around, and if you tried to leave the office would go, "Poets?" I was like, poets? I assumed that he was thinking something about poetry or Dead Poets Society, but he actually meant poets, which meant piss off early, tomorrow's Saturday, which was then a black mark against your name. How lovely. So that's not a great place to be. Now, law firms have improved, but the culture is still, no matter how the profession tries to change it, that air of perfectionism that you're always available, that you are the great white knight for justice, therefore you're available in the middle of the night. And of course, that's not great. The effect on lawyers in terms of suicide rates isn't great. Lawyers are pretty high up there in terms of suicides. And I know personally 3 colleagues over the course of my 20-year career who have committed suicide. So it's a scary thing. But it's this always on thing, I think, that drives people to the depression and to not feeling good about themselves. To essentially then really not taking care of themselves so that their family life suffers or they just don't feel very well. And this is being exacerbated all the time by the fact that now we are at home, there is no escape. It used to be, well, you've had a terrible day at the office, you go home and you relax, or you go to a bar and you relax. Now the bars are shut, and when you go home, you've got to take everything with you. In fact, you don't even go to the office at all. You may even want to go to the office to relax. So there's an issue. Now, I don't have any solutions to this that you can probably do a bit of a Google and say, oh, make sure you switch off. It's all, to some extent, about personal discipline. And if you're working for an organisation that don't let you have any sort of personal discipline, then arguing with them, trying to change things, or eventually finding another job, let's be honest. Some organisations, including the law firm where I work, have put together something that tries to stop people working outside their normal expected hours. It's accepting the fact that yeah, you sometimes do have to work very late. There are sometimes where demands are so high that you're going to be working all out, but it's about reducing stress. That at other times, if something isn't urgent, if it's not stressful, you don't have to do it then. We call it the Mindful Business Chart, and we've signed up with other law firms and other individual companies within the corporate and banking communities as well. And that makes a bit of a difference. But a lot of it comes down to you. Now, as a lawyer, I've often found it's very difficult to get a company to do something with some notable and good exceptions unless there's a legal reason. So I was looking a bit more carefully at the issue of mental health and the fact that people are working from home and what would happen if someone essentially suffers some sort of mental illness as a result. Now this isn't, I'm sure actually this is going on right now. Employers in many, I'd like to say most, in many jurisdictions are responsible for the well-being of their employees whilst they are at work, at least, normally whilst they're at work. The most obvious thing is this, is if someone gets injured in their job, you'll have seen all these ads on TV. Have you been injured at work? If you have, call this number and we guarantee no win, no fee, and we'll make sure that you drop that file cabinet on your foot and you end up becoming a millionaire. You normally don't, by the way. They take a cut of whatever you get. But if you were physically injured in the course of your job, normally in most jurisdictions, certainly here in Hong Kong, certainly in England and Wales, so that's the two that I'm qualified in, you can claim some compensation for your employer. Your employer may be liable. I have seen, though I don't see very many cases being a tech lawyer, but I have seen some horrible cases here in Hong Kong where employees have died and then the employer pays out to the estate, pays out to the family, which is not much of a recompense, but at least that requirement is there. Now, it's not as prevalent in terms of essentially of mental health, partially because I think there's a bit of a stigma related to mental health. Certainly in the legal profession, having any owning up to a mental health issue traditionally would be seen as weak, although that thankfully has changed a lot now. People are opening up to problems in the profession. But it made me wonder, if you are stuck at home, you are working. When you're working from home, you are technically working for your employer. So if you suffer an injury, I'm not creating loads of personal injury claims because of this, but if you suffer an injury, suppose, I don't know, you drop a jar of pickles onto your foot whilst you're working at home, then technically you could make a claim under the employers' compensation ordinance here in Hong Kong, and I dare say you could in other places. So how about if you are required to work incredible hours, or you find that you're on essentially Zoom calls from 8 a.m. to, I don't know, midnight, and it's starting to make you feel depressed or otherwise not feel yourself, would you have a claim against your employer then? Now, I think that you would. Depends on the jurisdiction entirely. Some only recognise physical illnesses anyway, so you may struggle, but I think you would, and I think it's something we all need to be aware of. Now, I'm not saying this because we need to be chasing ambulances and making claims and suing our employers, but in terms of raising awareness of the fact that actually this technology that has enabled us to actually still carry on working and operating, not quite as normal, but almost as normal through the whole COVID-19 pandemic, which, let's be honest, seems to show no signs of going away. I mean, as I said at the beginning, Hong Kong felt like it was over it and we were getting there and we were this beacon of hope, but now we're sort of tumbling down again, and we're hoping to grab onto a piece of, tumbling down, what would the analogy be? Grab onto a piece of grass or a rock and try and pull ourselves back up. But anyway, the fact is that we need to raise awareness that because we are now able to be on all the time, that we are bringing our work home, that we actually do need this time to switch off. Now, I'd be interested in what you think of this. By all means, please make some comments. I'm trying to keep this video as short as possible, though I bet I should have a timer somewhere that hits me over the head when I go on too long. But I'd be interested to think what you think of this. Is your organisation actually taking the steps to make sure that though you're working from home and though technology has been great, actually you need some changes, or have they been good at making sure that you're looked after, they're clear about what you should do and what you shouldn't do? I'd like to think, and I do think, that most organisations are being pretty good on this, but again, anecdotally, I also hear some absolute horror stories where people are getting up at 5 a.m. to do a call with the US. You can work out the time zones here. Then they have to work all the way through and they end up finishing work about 1 a.m., which means they're not getting any sleep, means they're on all of the time, and eventually it will lead to some sort of burnout, because burnout is a very real thing, and indeed technology is a very real thing in terms of tech burnout. The last thing is, whilst you're thinking about this, I often wonder what the liability would be for an employer where not only you're always on if you're at your computer screen, but most of us are on phones. Now, I've talked about how the Blackberry, everyone was really excited about getting one back when they first became a thing, and then they realised that they were basically a sentence whereby you would be checking it all the time. In one incident, I had a Blackberry, I'm probably getting into trouble for saying this actually, because I'm going to be public, but I was supposed to be DJing an event, and I had a particular boss who was very difficult and was messaging me on Blackberry, and my Blackberry, for some reason, accidentally broke on the floor and someone stood on it. I don't know how it happened. That was what I said to IT. It just broke, nothing to do with me. But that always being available thing was causing me a lot of stress. So I wonder whether the sheer number of devices we have is actually a problem too. But anyway, I'd be interested in your thoughts. I do think we will see, as time goes on, a bit of an increase in potential claims or employment issues arising out of the use of tech. Also, though, I would hope we would see tech enable some of those issues to be resolved and go away. We will have to wait and see. Last thing, though, while I remember ages ago I did a video about COVID-19 tracing apps now could be a cybersecurity issue. That has come to fruition. I am now getting so many text and phone calls with people saying that I need to basically report somewhere, and some of them say, oh, we need your bank details so that we can do a transfer of something here. I'm like, I'm not a complete fool, but if people are a complete fool, or at least they've not been educated in this, they may fall foul of it. Anyway, that's how technology is being used in a terrible way during lockdown, completely unrelated to what I'm talking about. Anyway, hopefully at some point I can get someone who's a bit more of an expert on mental health to give me some more facts on how technology in lockdown does have an impact on how we live. But until then, probably next time I'll be surrounded by records because I'll be at home. But until then, take care and see you soon.